What's going on, everyone? I figured I'd jump on here and share a couple of my thoughts on the whole situation that's going on in the mess known as Warner Brothers, DC, all of that stuff. I do want to say right off the bat that I am not giving James Gunn any grief here. I'm not giving Peter Safran any grief here. They have come into a world that's in turmoil to do a job. And I will reserve judgment on that job until the final product has been released, or at least a lot more details have been revealed. Granted, I am not pleased with a lot of the situations going on, but they do make a lot of sense, so I can't hold fault for James Gunn specifically when he has a track record of movies and characters and storylines that are far and away above some people in the same situation. The whole way that DC and Warner Brothers on the film side have mishandled everything, in my opinion, basically since 2008. I would say 2005, but I think the real nail in the coffin came in 2008. So what do I mean by that? I'm sure I'm not the first person to bring this up. I'm sure it's a well-trod factor here, but The Dark Knight, I believe, is the reason for most of the faults that have been going on inside the leadership over at DC. The Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises trilogy, for a lot of people, myself not included, were the height of Batman, period. Especially The Dark Knight, that whole Heath Ledger Joker thing, really started things off, I think, down this path to where we have been led over the past, I don't know, what do you want to say, 15 years of DC movies. Had that not been the case, had that not occurred, I don't think we would necessarily have ever been in this predicament. Would we have gotten a lot of great DC movies? I don't know if that's the case either, because if you look at the track record prior to that, we don't have much to go on besides something like Steel or movies that were lower tier. And then, of course, they would throw us a Batman and a Superman here and again, and they weren't really taking risks with other characters. So I think if you couple the Dark Knight trilogy, specifically the Dark Knight itself, and then throw that up against the burgeoning MCU, I think that's where our problems really come into play. So why do I say that? Well, I think the grounded, gritty, realistic turn in Batman, in my taste, wasn't something that I necessarily enjoyed. I personally believe the best of those three movies is Batman Begin. Far be it from me to call Christopher Nolan anything but a genius. I don't personally care for a Batman that's grounded. I know his whole shtick for a lot of people is the great detective that's built on a peak human physique, a peak human intellect, all of that stuff. But for my money, that's not necessarily what and who Batman should be. So while those movies were fine, they were fun, I enjoyed them, I think they went downhill from Batman Begins. And if it wasn't for Heath Ledger in that second movie, I'm not entirely certain they would be regarded as highly as they were. So that started the trajectory of trying to ground their storylines in a certain sense of reality, trying to play down the humor, trying to make them darker and grittier and more, I don't want to say realistic, but less cartoonish, less optimistic, all of that stuff. And that works to a certain extent with Batman. If you're building a Batman world in which only Batman exists, I can see that working fine. When you're trying to build an interconnected universe of various types of heroes, all with their own tone, all dealing with their own stuff, I think that starts to lead us astray. So once you start introducing Superman in that same vein with a movie like Man of Steel, things kind of take a downturn. I do like Zack Snyder, and I do like Henry Cavill, and that leads me to the crux of my problem. Warner Brothers and DC, specifically in these films, continually learn the wrong lesson from all of their failures and probably even all of their successes. Every single actor in this DCEU, barring, I would say, maybe two, those two for my money would have to be Ezra Miller's Flash and Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, were perfectly cast and had the capacity to be the greatest versions of most of these characters that had ever been put on screen. Who would have thought we would have had an Aquaman on screen that was actually taken seriously? Who would have thought we would have had another turn as Wonder Woman, and that was just two characters, and those are just two characters that we had never seen in live-action films before, who kind of got it right coming out of the gate. Now you've got your Superman and your Batman, the two top-tier characters. Of course they're going to be under a lot of scrutiny, and of course their movies were the ones that would really have to hold up this whole tentpole franchise. But when they took that dark tone coming off of the Dark Knight trilogy and tried to apply that to their new universe, and they tried to double up and match Marvel and beat them at their own game instead of building a universe, they fell flat on their face by thrusting this dark, weird tone into the movies right off the bat, coupling that with the fact that we've got a Superman just starting his career as Batman is kind of retired and ending his career, and that just kind of blows all the possibilities out the window. And then you throw in a lot of their other characters. You have Cyborg, his botched screen time in the original Justice League films. And then you also throw in Ezra Miller's Flash. I never was really sold on being a really Barry Allen type. He didn't actually fit that mold for me. I could have seen past that because he was more of the comedic relief. But with all of the external troubles going on with Ezra Miller, I don't think that would have played out well anyways. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that the lessons learned from the failures and the successes of these first few forays into the DCEU were never taken seriously in the correct vein. It wasn't the characters, it wasn't the actors, it was the storylines, the writing, the tone, the world. All of that stuff, the marketing even, was wrong. The actors playing these characters were never the problem, and that's where I think the huge downfall is of deciding to throw everything out and start over with the new world that James Gunn and friends are building. I understand that it's now so many years on from the start of this. All of these actors really committed and doing the best job with these characters that I think we had any right to ever see in the movies. Like I said, you've got Ben Affleck playing Batman and you've got Henry Cavill playing Superman. Those are always going to be held up as high scrutinized characters just because of the people that have played them in the past. I think both of them were far and away well above the task that was laid in front of them had they been given the chance. Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman and Aquaman by Jason Momoa are probably the two definitive versions of those characters that we're ever going to see on the big screen. I'm not going to take anything away from Linda Carter, but she was never in a large motion picture like this. And then you look at some of the peripheral things. You've got the Suicide Squad characters. All of them, even in the bad movie, well cast, well created, well curated characters. Maybe they didn't have the chops to come back and play a main component in the DCEU or the DCU, whatever it is going forward, but they really did flesh out the world and make it feel like a truly connected DC universe. And my personal favorites, who are very tangentially connected to anything, would have to be the Shazam and Shazam family. And those, to me, will be the biggest letdown if we are to lose them. I understand that they were so very disconnected to begin with that maybe we could hold on to them, but especially with the fact that The Rock's Black Adam, probably the real final nail in the coffin, I don't know if we're going to hold on to the Shazam family either. Henry Cavill as Superman was never given a real shot post Man of Steel. He was bandied about, he was brought in, he was thrown in for a cameo, he was taken out from a cameo, he was given this news, he was given that news. If he had been given a proper, hopeful, prime Superman type storyline, he could be the best version of Superman we've seen on screen. I understand that's sacrilege, I understand everyone's going to say Christopher Reeves is the best we'll ever have, but I believe Henry Cavill could have played the definitive version of Superman because he is so passionate about it, had he been given the chance. As far as recasting everyone, reshuffling, starting from scratch, I do believe that is a good way to go for two reasons. James Gunn doesn't really want or need to be burdened with all of this stuff, even if he truly does believe these actors are the best versions of the characters. He is coming in to create something on his own and pull this whole universe up from scratch. I don't fault him for not wanting to bring in all the baggage from before, even though quite a few vocal fans really do want these people to stick around. So I don't fault him for trying to just have that clean break. I do fault him a little bit for deciding to keep a little of the universe, specifically the stuff he had worked on, because that feels a little bit like cheating. But again, I will reserve judgment on that. And of course, the second part comes down to pure longevity and money, because even if Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot were truly going to play these characters for the long haul, and they were definitive. They're already older actors, and I don't mean they're over the hill and they're basically done with their lives. I mean, if you're going to try and milk a franchise for a decade, they're already older people, so they really couldn't play these characters in their prime for a significant length of time, not to mention the fact that they are all huge price tags. To hire and keep these people around, you're going to have to shell out a lot more money than starting from scratch and hiring lesser known or hell, even no-name actors to play these characters. This is the same problem that I believe Star Trek 4 is having. Not only is the demand possibly not there, and not only is the script not there, but these actors, Chris Pine, Zoe Saldana, John Cho, Simon Pegg, Zachary Quinto, all of these actors have just skyrocketed in popularity, and that's not even talking about if they're going to bring Chris Hemsworth back in. You have all of these actors who weren't necessarily originally household names, have since become household names, and if you're going to keep them around and try to start from scratch, you're already digging yourself a hole of millions of dollars just to pay these people to appear in the movies. And if you're trying to start from a lower budget tier and build something up from the ground, are you really going to want to throw all the money you have at established actors? And I don't know if that's the right answer, even though I think that would appease a lot of people as a business decision, even as a creative decision. I don't think that really holds any water. So as much as we really wanted them for the last decade to turn this ship around, to give these characters a decent story, to give them a world that actually felt hopeful and felt like a DC universe should, to feel in essence like the comic books come to life in the way that the DC animated universe knocked it out of the park. They had a template from the very beginning, the DC animated universe. They could have taken that and run with it. And instead, they decided to build off the lessons learned from the Dark Knight trilogy and try to beat Marvel to the punch and just throw a bunch of, I don't want to say crap at us, because Zack Snyder is a brilliant filmmaker, but in my opinion, he is more of a at the end of a lifespan of a universe type filmmaker. Had he come in and done Kingdom Come, for instance, or a big, grand 5 years in a DC Civil War, or some Elseworld storyline where the heroes were at odds, and that would have been a perfect way to bring Zack Snyder into this universe. But trying to build it from the ground up as a more divided and stylistic and less realistic feeling universe may have been a bad decision, even though I very much enjoyed the 250-hour-long version of Justice League. In the end, I do believe that canceling the DCEU and getting rid of all of these actors is a bad decision, but at the same time, they spent way too much time just kind of fiddling around with the universe and not really writing the ship. That it's just too late. Maybe they could bring these actors back and do a Kingdom Come movie in a few years. Maybe some of them will stick around in some offshoots, Elseworld storylines. Maybe a couple of the actors who aren't really that integral will still stick around as a doppelganger or whatever in this new universe. If Marvel really wants to stick it to DC right now, they should go after all of these actors, scoop them up, hire them, cast them in a Squadron Supreme movie, and beat DC to the punch once again. Although I really do want DC to succeed, I think that might be the baller move. But for the time being, I have to say that I want to give James Gunn the benefit of the doubt, and I will do that. However, I will not forget that they screwed over possibly the best versions of these characters we will ever see on screen, and they never gave them the shot that they deserve. I really just needed to get that off. I'm sure nobody is still watching at this point, but let me know all your thoughts below. Leave a like, give a share, do a comment. I'm pretty sure that's not the right way to say any of those things, but until next time, Shazam!